Have you ever walked into an ordinary evening believing tomorrow would be exactly the same, only to discover that one choice could quietly erase the person you had always been? Before this story continues, ask yourself one question. If someone handed you the chance to become the version of yourself you had secretly imagined, but accepting it meant you could never return to your old life, would you say yes? I thought my answer was obvious. I was wrong, because after tonight, there would be no turning back. It was a rainy Friday evening when my phone buzzed with a message from Emma, one of the few friends who always seemed to understand me better than I understood myself. Come over tonight. Don't make excuses. I have something important to show you. That was all the message said. No explanation. No clues. Just confidence. Normally, I would have ignored something so mysterious, but Emma wasn't someone who wasted words. If she wanted me there had to be a reason. An hour later, I stood outside her apartment, listening to the rain tap softly against the windows. She opened the door before I even knocked. I knew you'd come, she smiled. You sounded serious. I am. Her apartment looked different than usual. Candles gave the room a warm glow. Soft music played quietly in the background. Everything felt peaceful, almost carefully prepared. She handed me a mug of hot coffee and motioned toward the couch. I've been watching you for months. I laughed nervously. That sounds a little creepy. She laughed too. I don't mean like that. I mean I've watched the way you admire fashion, the way you notice colors, fabrics, hairstyles, makeup techniques. But every time you catch yourself, you immediately pretend you weren't interested. I looked away. She wasn't wrong. Whenever we walked past clothing stores, my eyes naturally drifted toward elegant dresses and stylish outfits before I quickly forced myself to look somewhere else. Whenever beauty tutorials appeared online, I secretly watched them, not because I wanted to copy them immediately, but because I genuinely admired the creativity and skill behind them. I had convinced myself those thoughts didn't mean anything. Emma sat across from me. You spend so much energy pretending you're not curious. I'm just interested. Exactly. There was no judgment in her voice, only kindness. She stood and walked into another room. When she returned, she carried 3 large shopping bags. She placed them gently on the coffee table. What are those? My surprise. She slowly opened the first bag. Inside was a beautiful cream-colored sweater dress. The second contained fitted jeans, elegant blouses, and soft cardigans. The third held makeup brushes, skincare products, jewelry, and a carefully styled shoulder-length brunette wig. I stared without speaking. Finally, I looked up. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I'm not wearing those. You don't have to. She folded her arms. But before you say no, answer one question honestly. I nodded. Have you ever wondered? Silence. The question sounded simple. Yet it reached somewhere deep inside me. Had I wondered? Yes. Countless times. What would it feel like? Would I look ridiculous? Would I actually enjoy learning fashion? Would I finally understand why so many people loved creating completely different styles? Those questions had lived quietly in my mind for years. Questions I had never answered. Emma noticed the hesitation. Curiosity isn't something to be ashamed of. I'm just afraid. I know. Afraid I'll look stupid. You probably will. I laughed. So why do it? Because everyone looks awkward the first time they learn something new. That answer surprised me. She wasn't promising perfection. She wasn't saying I'd suddenly look amazing. She was simply reminding me that beginners are supposed to be beginners. She walked toward the hallway. The bathroom is ready. I didn't agree. You haven't refused either. I looked at the shopping bags again. The clothes no longer looked intimidating. They looked interesting. I slowly reached inside. The fabric felt incredibly soft. Far softer than I expected. The quality alone made me pause. Fashion suddenly felt less like costumes and more like craftsmanship. Emma noticed. You smiled. I did not. You definitely did. I rolled my eyes. Maybe a little. She grinned. Good. I picked up the sweater dress and held it against myself. For the first time, instead of imagining how ridiculous I might look, I found myself wondering something completely different. What if this isn't as impossible as I've always believed? That single thought frightened me more than anything else. Because once curiosity becomes possibility, everything begins to change. I took a slow breath, looked toward the bathroom door, tightened my grip on the outfit, and realized the next 5 minutes might quietly become the dividing line between my old life and everything that came after. I stood outside the bathroom door for what felt like forever. The sweater dress rested over my arm, the wig still inside the shopping bag, and my heart was beating so loudly it almost drowned out the music playing in the apartment. Every excuse I could think of rushed through my mind. I could laugh it off, hand everything back to Emma, and walk out. No one would stop me. No one would think less of me. It would be easy. But then another thought appeared. If I leave now, I'll spend years wondering what would have happened if I had stayed. That question was stronger than my fear. I stepped inside and quietly locked the door. The room was warm, brightly lit, and surprisingly organized. Emma had already arranged everything on the counter. A simple skincare routine, a few makeup products, a hairbrush, and a handwritten note. Don't rush. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about allowing yourself to explore. I smiled without realizing it. There was no pressure to be perfect, only permission to be curious. I changed into the sweater dress first. As the soft fabric settled against my shoulders, I immediately noticed something unexpected. It wasn't about looking feminine. It was about feeling different. The fit naturally encouraged better posture. I instinctively stood straighter. My shoulders relaxed. Even the way I moved became slower and more deliberate. I turned toward the mirror. At first, I only saw someone wearing unfamiliar clothes. Then I stopped looking at the clothes. Instead, I looked at my expression. I looked calmer. That surprised me. A gentle knock came from outside. "Everything okay?" Emma asked.
Yeah.
"You don't sound convinced." "I'm just thinking."
Good.
"Take your time." I reached for the wig next. After carefully placing it on, I adjusted it several times before it finally looked natural. A few loose strands framed my face, softening my features in a way I had never expected. It still wasn't enough to completely change my appearance. It simply gave me a new perspective. I couldn't stop staring. Not because I thought I looked perfect, because I was seeing possibilities. Emma knocked again. "Can I come in?" "1 second." I opened the door slowly. She looked at me for several moments without saying anything. That silence made me nervous. Finally, she smiled. "I was right." "About what?" "You've been hiding behind comfort for a long time." I looked down at the dress. "I feel strange." "Strange can be the beginning of confidence." She invited me back into the living room where a large mirror stood against the wall. "Now the fun begins." She sat me in a chair and began explaining each step before touching a single product. "We're not trying to hide your face. Makeup isn't about hiding. It's about highlighting." She applied moisturizer first, then primer. Every movement was calm and patient. She explained why skincare mattered more than makeup itself, how healthy skin created a smoother finish, and why less product often looked more natural than heavy layers. I listened carefully. For the first time, makeup didn't seem complicated. It seemed like learning an art. Foundation came next. She blended it slowly until it almost disappeared. "See," she said, handing me a mirror. "It doesn't look fake." "It isn't supposed to." Concealer brightened the areas beneath my eyes. A little contour created subtle definition. Soft blush added warmth. Nothing dramatic. Nothing exaggerated. Just balance. Then came the eyebrows. "You'd be amazed," Emma said, "how much eyebrows influence expressions." A few careful strokes completely changed the harmony of my face. Mascara followed. I blinked several times. "My eyes look bigger." "They've always looked like that. You just never noticed." That sentence stayed with me. Sometimes nothing about us changes. Only the way we finally choose to see ourselves. She picked up a lipstick. "What color?" "I have no idea." She laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." After comparing several shades, she chose a soft rose color. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It simply completed the look. She handed me the mirror again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The reflection looking back at me wasn't perfect. It wasn't flawless, but it carried a quiet confidence that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "I don't know what I'm feeling," I whispered. "You don't have to name it yet." I slowly stood from the chair. Even walking felt different now. Not because the clothes forced me to move differently, but because I had become more aware of every movement I made. Emma noticed immediately. "Slow down. I'm already walking slowly. You can slow down even more." She demonstrated. Small steps, relaxed shoulders, gentle movements, purpose instead of speed. I copied her. At first I felt awkward. Then something clicked. Instead of trying to imitate someone else, I simply focused on moving naturally. Each step became smoother. Each movement felt more controlled. The nervousness that had filled the evening slowly transformed into curiosity. Then Emma walked toward the hallway closet and opened the door. Inside sat several neatly arranged shoe boxes. She looked back at me with a smile that instantly made me nervous again. "I think you're ready for the next lesson." I looked at the boxes. "Those aren't what I think they are they?" Emma nodded. "They're heels." My stomach flipped. I've never even touched a pair. "I know." She picked up one elegant black pair, placed them gently on the floor in front of me, and said with a confident smile, "And trust me, this is the moment you'll remember for the rest of your life." Emma placed the heels carefully on the floor between us. They weren't towering stilettos like the ones I had imagined. Instead, they were elegant black pumps with a modest heel. "I chose these for a reason," she said. "They don't look as impossible as I expected." They're not. Confidence grows step by step, not inch by inch. I smiled nervously. That sounded rehearsed. She laughed. "I've had years to practice giving advice." I sat down and slipped my feet into the shoes. The first thing I noticed wasn't the height. It was the balance. Everything about the way I stood immediately changed. My weight shifted naturally. My back straightened. Even my chin lifted slightly without me thinking about it. I carefully stood up. For exactly 1 second, I felt confident. Then I took my first step. "I've got you," Emma said quickly as I reached for the wall. We both laughed. "I told you this would happen. I thought walking would be easy." "Everyone thinks that." She demonstrated first. "Don't rush." She walked slowly across the room. "Heels aren't about speed." She turned gracefully. "They're about control." I watched every movement. Small steps, relaxed shoulders, eyes forward, gentle rhythm. No unnecessary movement. I copied her. The first few attempts looked awkward enough to make us both laugh. My arms moved too much. My steps were uneven. I kept looking down at my feet. Emma stopped me. "Never look at your feet." "Why?" "Because confidence always looks forward." That simple sentence stayed with me. I lifted my head. Suddenly balancing became easier. After 15 minutes, something surprising happened. The heels no longer felt like obstacles. They felt like teachers. They forced me to slow down, to breathe, to become aware of every movement, to stop rushing through life. Emma clapped softly. "There you go. I'm actually walking." "No." She smiled proudly. "You're learning." That felt even better. She picked up her phone. "One more thing." "What now?" "I want you to watch yourself." She started recording as I walked across the living room. Watching the playback a few moments later was strange. At first, I only noticed my mistakes. Then Emma paused the video. "What do you see?" I look nervous. "Look again." I watched more carefully. I stand straighter. "Yes." My shoulders aren't slouched. "Exactly." And I hesitated. "You look more confident than you believe." I stared at the screen. She was right. Confidence hadn't appeared all at once. It had quietly arrived while I was too busy worrying about getting everything perfect. Emma put her phone away. "Now we're ready for the final touch." She walked toward the bedroom and returned carrying a long beige trench coat. She draped it gently over my shoulders. Then she handed me a simple handbag. "No way." "Oh yes." "This is too much." "It's just an outfit." I looked in the full-length mirror. Everything suddenly looked complete. Not exaggerated. Not theatrical. Just polished. Like someone prepared for an evening in the city. Emma circled around me, adjusting the collar slightly. There. What? You stopped trying to hide. I hadn't even realized it. When I first arrived, my arms had stayed crossed. My shoulders were tense. I avoided mirrors. Now I stood naturally, making eye contact with my own reflection without thinking about it. That frightened me a little, because the biggest change wasn't on the outside. It was happening somewhere much deeper. Emma walked to the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She handed me one. A toast. To what? Trying something you were afraid of. We gently tapped our glasses together. For a few quiet minutes, we talked about fashion, color coordination, skincare routines, posture, and confidence. Emma explained that style wasn't about copying someone else. It was about understanding what made you feel comfortable and authentic. I listened more carefully than I had listened to almost anything in years. There was so much I had never allowed myself to learn simply because I assumed it wasn't meant for me. Then Emma suddenly checked the time. Her smile faded just enough for me to notice. Oh, what? I almost forgot. She walked over to the table and picked up a cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. She held it for a moment before placing it in my hands. This wasn't supposed to happen tonight. What is it? I received 2 invitations. I carefully broke the seal. Inside was an elegant invitation card. Private style and etiquette workshop. Tomorrow evening. Invitation only. Formal attire required. Guests may bring 1 companion. I looked up. You want me to go? I don't. She smiled. I think you need to. My heart started racing. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I've only been doing this for a few hours. And look how much you've already learned. What if everyone notices I'm a beginner? Emma looked directly into my eyes. They will. My confidence disappeared. She continued before I could speak. And that's perfectly okay. Every expert in that room was once exactly where you are now. I looked down at the invitation again. The workshop suddenly felt much bigger than learning clothes or makeup. It felt like standing at the edge of a completely unfamiliar world. Emma placed one hand gently on my shoulder. You can walk away tonight and nothing changes. She paused. Or you can walk through that door tomorrow and discover just how much you've been capable of all along. I folded the invitation carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. For several long seconds, the apartment was completely silent. Then I took a slow breath, looked at Emma, and quietly said the words that would change everything. I'll go. Emma smiled, but instead of celebrating, she simply nodded, as though she had been expecting that answer all along. She glanced toward the window, then back at me. Good, she said softly. Because tomorrow you're going to meet someone who will challenge everything you think you know about confidence, presentation, and yourself.